My name is Daria Serebrikova, and I'm an editor in All Correct Language Solutions. Some of you may already know me. My task in All Correct is editing written translations, checking them before sending in to clients, and giving marks and feedback to freelancers. My colleagues and I mainly check and edit Russian and English texts, but our company translates texts into many other languages too. So your help as native speakers is essential, and we ask you to fill in quality assessment forms when we cannot do it in-house. First of all, let's make it clear why we ask to fill in quality assessment forms at all. To answer this question, I would like to show you a simplified scheme of technical process in All Correct. As you can see, it is a cycle, and this cycle initially begins with a client. He wants to translate something, and a project manager does all the necessary work to make it possible. First of all, translation is done, and then we sometimes move on to editing. Before handing that translation in to the client, we must make sure that it is a good product and our client will be happy with it. This is when we ask you to check the text and fill in the quality assessment form. We cannot hand in a translation without at least a false check. When editing is absent, which is, by the way, is not a rare case, examining the quality of translation becomes especially necessary. We would love to make both editing and quality control separate stages, but unfortunately, we very seldom, if ever, have time to do this. That is why we ask you to do a job which is partly editing and partly quality control. In fact, we try to reach two goals. First, to make a text as good as possible in a given time, and second, to be aware of the quality of translation when we hand it in. As you see from the scheme, after that, the work is not over because the most probable variant is that this client will send something else for translation. As the number of freelancers we work with is limited, we think it is vital that we send them feedback because they should learn continuously. To make it possible, we sometimes ask you to fill in assessment forms. I want to make the difference between the assessment form and the quality assessment form perfectly clear. We ask you to fill in these forms to reach two different goals. If we want to check and probably correct the text itself, we need the quality assessment form. We always ask you to fill it in except for when we have really small texts. If we want to know whether the translator, that is a person, a specialist, is professional enough, if we want to find out his strengths and weaknesses and give him or her feedback, we need the assessment form. We don't need it on every project, but we ask you to fill it in from time to time to make sure that a certain translator keeps doing his work well. It is extremely important to understand that assessing the quality of translation and assessing the translator's competencies are two different things. They may sometimes be close, but in other cases, they distinctly differentiate from each other. The most simple example is the situation when the text is translated by several specialists. We have already had a seminar about filling in assessment forms, and I hope everyone has a link to the copy of this webinar. If not, please write to me and I will give you a link. And today, I would like to dwell on the way to fill in quality assessment forms. Please have a look at the form. I believe you know it rather well. You can see four main fields here. First comes some general information, then classes of errors and their status, then comments, and finally, explanation of classes of errors. There is also a second page with issue types. We will have a look at it later. I hope there are no problems with writing general information. You don't need to write a translator's name. Everything else is quite simple. Working with QA form itself may be quite difficult, and so I would like to pay much attention to error clauses. To make things clear, I'm going to give some examples. Most of them are taken from my own practice, so I will say sorry in advance if you see that some error was made by you. It is a secret, and as under absolutely no conditions, I'm going to point to this or that freelancer as an author of a mistake. The other comment, a couple of examples will be in Russian, but I will surely translate everything into English and explain some specific things in detail. So here is this system as a scheme, which you can see on the second page of the form. First of all, I'd like to say that this system is not our invention. It is a classification called Multi-Dimensional Quality Matrix Issue Types by Qt Launchpad Consortium. We simplified this scheme a bit to make it more convenient for our process. Let's examine four major error classes: accuracy, fluency, verity, and design. Let's begin with accuracy. Accuracy addresses the extent to which the target text accurately renders the meaning of the source text. The relationship between the source and target language is very important here. The translated text itself may be correct from any point of view, but render a different idea than the original text. Wrong tones, omissions, and additions all fall into this category. Look at the examples. In the first case, the translation should be "find the chest near the western fountain." And here, the translated instruction is quite different from the original one. In the second example, we have a name of the game, Battlefield 4. The translator omitted the numeral, which led to a mistake also related to accuracy. Fluency relates to the monolingual qualities of the source or target text relative to agreed-upon specifications, but independent of relationship between source and target. In other words, fluency issues can be assessed without regard to whether the text is a translation or not. The text may be characterized as unintelligible. It happens when it is hardly possible to understand what is written at all. Fluency issues fall into two categories: content and mechanical. The first category relates to mistakes in style and inconsistent terms. The second one deals with spelling and grammar mistakes and local violations. Have a look at the examples. In the first case, we have a spelling error because battlefield should be written with one L after double T. In the second case, we have an extra space before one of the commas, which is a typographical mistake. In the third example, we have two consecutive sentences in which Sound City is spelled in two different ways, with lowercase c and with capital C. Look at the examples again. All of these issues can be recognized without looking into the original text. So they influence the fluency aspect. Verity issues address the relationship between the text and its world. Verity issues address whether the text is adequate and sufficient in its representation of the world or suffers from other problems with regard to usability. A text may be translated accurately and fluently, but contain claims which, in our case, will make it hard or impossible for a player to progress in the game. Here is the example. There was a mistake in the original text, and one of the same collection was named in two different ways. The translator didn't realize it and translated these word combinations in two different ways too. Now, formally, we do not have any mistake. There were two different combinations which were translated differently. But if it appears in the text, the player will not be sure if one or two collections are meant, and it will create certain difficulties in playing. Verity issues do not always have to do with mistakes in the source text. Some content may be meant for players in one country and can be completely inappropriate for people in another country with different religion and cultural background. The text can have content which does not correspond to its age rating. This is also a verity issue. Design is perhaps the easiest category to understand. Design issues relate only to those cases in which formatting or styling apply to text. We mostly have to work with logkits, which are spreadsheets without complicated formatting. So, design issues can concern words typed in bold, in italics, or underlined words. It may sometimes be important to pay attention to the color of cells. For example, our task may be to translate lines highlighted in green, edit lines marked in yellow, and do not touch red lines. Your project manager will always make it clear if such things are important. These are main error classes. If you have something to add, you can do it in the field Other, but please specify what mistakes you mean. Now you have to choose a status of different errors chosen from the drop-down list. As I have already mentioned, you are required to do partly editing and partly quality control. The degree to which you do editing is defined by the time you are given for the task. You may have enough time to correct all the mistakes you have found, or only have time to look through the text and name types of present mistakes. If you choose Not Detected option, you mean that you have found no mistakes of such kind. Consequently, there are no mistakes to correct. If you choose Detected option, you mean that you have found some mistakes but haven't corrected any of them. And these mistakes are still present in the text. If you manage to correct some of the detected mistakes, you choose Partially Corrected option. We will know that the text became better, but there are still mistakes left. If you choose Fully Corrected option, it means that you have found certain mistakes and corrected all of them. You imply that there are no more errors of such type to correct. If you have something more to say, if you have important comments on translation quality or ways to improve the text, feel free to write them in a special box, your comments. Project managers will highly appreciate your assistance. We ask you to write objective, precise, detailed comments with examples and references. They would really make our work easier and more effective too. So that was probably all I had to say. I hope the webinar was not too long and boring, and I managed to tell something useful. Now, if you have questions, you can ask them in the written form. On the slide, you can see my email address, and I will always be really glad to help. Thank you very much for being with me. I had a great time planning this webinar and sharing it with you. I wait for your letters, and bye.